Hello and welcome to Opening Bars. I often turn to Wikipedia to start my investigative journeys, and most often I seem to only retrieve the barest of relevant reference to music theory. Most often, the entries discuss the lyrics and potential meanings of the song. I really find this particular page a step above the norm. It's worth reading aloud for its musical distinction. Fever is a song by English singer Dua Lipa and Belgian singer Angèle from the French edition of the former's second studio album, Future Nostalgia. The song was written by the singers alongside Ailin, Jacob Kasher Hindlin, Julia Michaels, and the producer, Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm going to skip a little bit ahead here now. It's a dance pop, deep house, and new disco song with 2000s Eurodance elements and a disco pop production that features Afrobeat-tinged synth-pop beats. The song is composed in 4/4 time and the key signature of F-sharp minor with a tempo of 115 beats per minute. It has a structure of verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, middle 8, bridge. The verses follow an F-sharp minor, E, B minor chord progression, while an additional D chord is added to the sequence everywhere else. The song features a slinky disco pop production that includes Afrobeat-tinged synth-pop beats, digital melodies, and dynamic percussion that contains hand claps and a snap sound. The song opens with tropical synths, while it as a whole features airy instrumentation and off-kilter melodies. Lipa and Angèle both sing in French and English with their vocals ranging from F-sharp 3 to C-sharp 5. Lipa begins the song using confident vocals before stretching her voice to perform a dramatic falsetto in the chorus. Following a drop in a tropical house beat, Angèle whisper sings the second verse using a breathy vocal style and singing in French. Angèle sings in iambic pentameter as the rhythm speeds up and the two sing together after the second verse. Well, clearly this is an amalgam of web references, for that is what Wikipedia is really, but I am impressed with the entry. That certainly is, musically speaking, encouraging. Let's begin our own examination now. We'll be using a piano grand staff with bass clefs for both the right hand and the left hand, 3 sharps, and a time signature of 4/4. Let's talk about this a bit first. First of all, it's clear that the opening bars are not indicative of a typical piano sound, but I think we can agree that it is some sort of synth or sample library triggered by a keyboard-like instrument. Second, the bass clef for the right hand makes a lot of sense, as it eliminates the need for excessive ledger lines in a treble clef. The key signature seems okay, 3 sharps for F-sharp minor, and of course 4/4 works perfectly here. The harmonic movement for the intro and verse is very simple. F-sharp minor to E major, and back to F-sharp minor, the tonic, and then to the 4 B minor, ending with a hint of E to progress back to the tonic once again. The chorus too is noteworthy. Notice how the B minor comes in earlier and consumes measure 3, and see measure 4. This is where the colorful relative major D major, the 6, is introduced. I don't think this needs any real explanation, but I would like to point out how the tonic, flat 7 and flat 6 are very prevalent in pop music. Normally this is a guitar composer tendency, I suppose, perhaps as a result of bar chords, but here it is animated by that synth pseudo-arpeggio. As for the rhythm, I'm not sure I've ever heard this rhythmic motif in pop music before, an arpeggiated triplet over the eighth, plus an eighth on B1, followed by straight eighths. Very cool. My only comment is to keep these very even and metronomical. That's where this rhythmic grammar gets its musical power. The execution is staccato, in other words, the notes are musically distinct and detached from one another. Here it is with the notes attached and detached. I thought the hand claps and percussion were really interesting. It took a little while to try and figure out where they were actually happening in measure 3 and 4. They seem almost random, and perhaps they are, but I do like the juxtaposition of the strictness of the synth riff above it. Again, très cool. Now that you know the notes, you can concentrate on advancing specific piano techniques. One skill you can work on while practicing is what I call bridging the staff. By that I mean to not react and play the way you see the score. I've talked about this phenomenon before related to eliminating the bar lines when you play, but this here too is equally relevant. It's interesting that this may only be a problem for those musicians trained in score reading. I less often hear the artifact in students who learn to play by ear. But on with the explanation. Look at the bass notes in the left hand on the page and the subsequent motif in the right hand. Our inclination is to use our left hand and right hand independently, and they will end up sounding like, well, two separate hands. What I'd like to aim for in this performance is a seamless transition between the two, so that the listener does not even know or realize which hand is playing what. This is accomplished two ways, with rhythmic precision and velocity control. In other words, give the notes their designated values and be sure to make the left hand and right hand consistent in perceived dynamic loudness, with only the very slightest of dynamic curve to the motif. I'm going to exaggerate this effect, but see if you can hear the difference. This notion is often much more pronounced and important in the rendering of advanced classical solo piano repertoire. Think Liszt or Chopin, but if you wish to raise your art, consider it here too. One suggestion to improve your overall musicianship would be to consider the rule of 4 in composition and songwriting. Well, to be fair, this is not a real term, but it's one I use myself, loosely based on the rule of 3, and it spawned from my understanding of the role of patterning, repetition, and novelty. You may hear this expressed in any number of ways, but for me, it stems from creating a motif that generates musical interest and finding a way to embed it in your brain, but also make it sound novel enough to continue paying attention to it. So if you examine the introduction to Fever, we can see the 1-bar motif is repeated down a tone and then reiterated in measure 3 exactly as in measure 1. And finally, in the last measure of this intro, measure 4, it gives us a slightly novel, melodically altered version based on the chord that supports it. Yet it's still completely recognizable as a form of the first 3 presentations. This is a terrific example of superior compositional construction. It clearly establishes a motivic hook, its primary rhythmic character, its textual fabric, and some notion of a tonal canvas. I think all composers and songwriters are instinctively aware of this approach as it is so ubiquitous in music, but it makes sense to name it and look for it elsewhere. For instance, listen to this strategy in Shape of You by Ed Sheeran. 4 identical rhythmic patterns, 3 identical top notes modified only at its conclusion, with familiar and comfortable harmonic movement. And check out Walk This Way by Aerosmith. Almost identical each time, except for the very slightest of embellishment in measure 4, and its setup for the verse. Or look at Playing with Fire by Blackpink. Measure 1 and measure 3 are rhythmically identical, as are measures 2 and 4. Keep your ears tuned to this compositional technique, as it is far more prevalent than you might even consciously realize. I hope you enjoyed your lesson today. Remember, don't just play notes. Make music. Until next time, thanks for listening.